Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys. My name is Kate Mosse. I'm on the executive committee of WOW, and in my real life I am a novelist and a playwright, and one of the founders of the Bailey's Women's Prize for Fiction. And it's an enormous pleasure to be here to interview the amazing Jónína Leósdóttir, who is a friend. And we know each other as writers first and foremost. And we met partly because of a women's prize in Iceland that Jónína is involved with. But a couple of little things I'm going to tell you about Jónína before we talk. That Jónína is an extremely brilliant writer in many different fields, plays certainly, novels certainly, for adults and for young people, had her own radio show, studied in England, and indeed put her husband pretty much through university in those days, and has a grown-up son. But we're talking today about her extraordinary book, Jóhanna and I, which is published in Iceland and is not yet published in English, but fingers crossed very soon. And we were talking about whether it was rather bizarre at the WOW Festival for all the things that Jónína has done, for essentially us to be doing an interview which was her as a wife. And was this a very unfeminist thing to do? And we decided this was cool. We didn't mind. So what we're going to do is talk for about 40 minutes. Jónína has some images, some photos to sort of tell the story of this incredible love affair. Because actually, this is what the story is really about. And then we will throw it open for about 15 minutes of questions. You will all be leaving this room at 2 minutes to 1, because I know many of you have other things that you need to get to, and we don't want anybody being trampled on the stairs. So, before we start, just another round of applause for Jónína, the writer.
Thank you.
So here we are, on a stage again.
Yes,
but
amazing.
You've got some pictures this time.
But last time you did all the talking in Iceland. She came to Iceland to give a talk when we were giving out the Women's Prize, Literature Prize in Iceland, which I co-founded. And then she had to do all the talking. I didn't have to do anything. So
you did? You actually had to drive me around?
Yes, I showed her some of the sites. Shall I start going with the slides? This is just to take you through our 30-year relationship. I have just written a book, and that's why I'm here, not because I'm married to somebody, but because I've just written a book about a very exceptional marriage, a relationship really, because it wasn't a marriage until recently. A relationship with Johanna Sigurðardóttir, who became Prime Minister of Iceland in 2009. But we have roots that go far back, and this is where we met, the first photo. It's a committee of women, as you can see. It's a committee about equal pay, and it was established by Johanna. She was, and still is, very passionate about equal pay and women's rights, and she asked for all the political parties to nominate somebody on the committee, and also everybody from the labour market. And you will get a prize. Not really. If you see me in the picture, I have been sunbathing a bit. I'm third from the left and standing at the back, trying to...
I didn't actually recognise you there either, I'm afraid.
But this is also what I try to do. I always try to blend into the background, and I was doing it there. And the next...
Hold on, okay. Point out Jóhanna to everybody.
Didn't I? Well, she's in the middle, of course, in the front. That's exactly the difference between the two of us. She is always at the forefront, and I like to sit with a glass of wine at the back somewhere.
Yeah, you're in good company. That's what writers do, sit at the back with glasses of wine. But just to sort of focus on that at the moment, did you know Jóhanna at all? I mean, you would know her by reputation, but had you ever talked to her?
No.
And did you go along with any sort of sense of it being, this is silly really, this question, but a special thing, or you went along because you were part of this and you're a campaigner and you're a great supporter of, obviously, of women's rights, and it was just it was luck? This is a fairy tale.
Or bad luck.
Bad luck.
I don't know. Well, I no premonition or anything, and I was not interested in the labor market or equal rights. I've always been a book person, and I had just finished, when I went to sit on this committee, I had just finished a degree in literature, and that's what I wanted to do, writing. And I was sort of trapped really into politics because I went and became, we have a different kind of system from you. How do you pronounce it? Proportional representation, right? And so I was on that list, and I got very close to becoming an MP. We call it an alternate MP, and that's why I was involved in politics, and my party asked me to be on this committee. I had no expectations. I didn't want to be there. And
is that why you're at the back? You're
yes,
near the door,
exactly,
aren't you?
trying to escape. So I only knew Johanna from television. I had seen her. She had been an MP for 5 years, and she had already started to make her mark. She was very, very efficient. She works like mad, all the time, and she was the only MP who was at her office during the summer. They all disappear when there's no session, and she was always there. Sorry,
No, you don't need to face it. You know what I look like. Look at them. They're much better.
Okay. So, yeah, that's how we met, and for some reason I started looking so much forward to going to these meetings, and I didn't realize what was happening with me. And
politics is gripping,
especially labor market and that kind of stuff. It should have made some bells ring, but nothing alerted me to this, and I kept becoming such a committee person, and I was thinking about these things and looking forward to the meetings. And my 30th birthday was in '84, and my family, my mother proudly told me that everybody was going to give me a joint birthday present. They were going to give me a KitchenAid, to make cakes, a mixer, a KitchenAid.
No idea
mixer.
What that's called. No. As I said earlier, writers drink wine. They don't
exactly. And I said, no, I don't want a mixer. I want a briefcase. Because I was such a committee person, and they gave me a bright red briefcase to go with my passion. And then gradually I started thinking, what on earth is going on? And I was trying to analyze this. Before you go
to the next picture then, this is, again, a crude question, but key to the story. Were you still married at that point? Or
Very much.
Very much so?
Yes.
Oh, so, and had you ever before been in a relationship
Absolutely
with a woman?
Absolutely not, never. Right. It never occurred to me that this would happen to me. It just wasn't anywhere on my horizon. Very strange. I know people say you must have been just blocking it out and just not being able to face it, whatever. If so, I did a very good job, because I had no idea. And before I get to the next picture, I sort of decided to tell Johanna about my feelings, because I somehow got to the conclusion that maybe it's got something to do with her. And I'm jumping it a little bit to show you this picture. This is us after the relationship started. It's in October '85. And then I have to go back a bit. This is a women's strike. We had the first strike, women's strike in Iceland in 1975. About 90% of women stopped work. And it doesn't matter if you're working at home, cooking and looking after the children, or if you were in the workplace. And we went to the center of Reykjavik and had a demonstration. And I was living in England at the time, so I didn't take part. This is the 10-year anniversary, and we went together, and this is the first photo that was ever taken of us together. And as you can see, we have quite a bit of space between us. We're not, because it was still, and would be for a long time, a secret, our relationship. It was a secret for 14 years, more or less.
14 years? Because of the potential damage to her career, or because you didn't want it to not be spoiled, but have a spotlight on it that would make it less intimate? Was it both of those things?
Well, shall I tell you how it started, maybe?
Yeah. Everybody, I've told them it's the great love story. You've got to give us the stuff.
It started because on this committee we had meetings all over Iceland, and Jóhanna had to go to a meeting in the east of Iceland, and the woman who was going with her, because we always went, the two of us together, somehow she phoned up 2 or 3 days before and said she couldn't go, and I immediately said, I'll go, because there's only one flight a day and we had to stay over.
Canny.
Yeah. So I thought, I'm going to use this opportunity and I'm going to try and tell her that I think perhaps maybe something's happening with me, connecting with her. You know, it was also vague. I honestly didn't know how to explain it, not to myself or to anybody else. But the day before we left, I decided I needed some courage, so I went and bought a bottle of sherry.
How very English of you.
Croft original sherry.
Yeah.
Pale and sweet, and something I haven't drunk since, but still. I took it with me, and we had this meeting that we were there for, and then in the evening we had dinner. It was Sunday, and there was nobody in the hotel, just the two of us. And it was 9 o'clock, and she was about to say goodnight, and I still hadn't done anything. So I said, I've got this sherry in my room. Do you want to come and have some sherry? And she told me to bring it to her room, and which I did. And then I started telling her, and I was in complete blackout. I didn't know what I was saying and trying to explain the unexplainable. And she looked very interested. And she and it was like an interrogation. I mean, it was just question after question. Why do you think it's got something to do with me? And how exactly does this manifest itself? Blah, blah, blah. And I was getting the third degree. And
because she hadn't been in a relationship,
had a poker face
with a woman either.
No, she was married with 2 children.
Yeah.
And it would have been just as ridiculous if she'd been a man, because I didn't know this person. Now, I just hardly knew that she was married. I had the vague idea she had 2 children, and it was just like they say in the American movies. It must have been some kind of chemistry, because she was the wrong sex, and I didn't know her. So it was.
Hollywood's built an entire industry on that. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Do you want to give us another photo?
Yeah, that's Johanna before she met me. She was unspoiled with 2 little children before I ruined her marriage.
I think she looks quite bored, actually. I have to say.
Yeah, she's just waiting for me. And this is after our relationship started. We were just photographed by chance. We were at the same gathering, just happened to stand together, and it's a picture that I treasure, because there are so few pictures of us. We don't have a lot of photographs of us together, because it was always just the 2 of us. There was nobody there to take the pictures except our sons, and the pictures would look up under my double chins, so I threw them away. So yeah, in the hotel she didn't sort of say anything except asking questions, very interested, poker face, and then in the end she said something which made me really scared, because I hadn't gone that far in my thinking, saying, you can absolutely trust me on this, I'm not going to tell anyone. And I hadn't even thought that she might tell people, and my sort of reputation would be ruined. So I left, and when I locked the door I realized I didn't have an alarm clock. And I didn't want to. I would rather have walked through fire and glass than knock on the door again. And one thing I said to her, which was very undiplomatic, I was trying to explain that I didn't really know if I was gay or if I wanted her attention. And I said, if you would stand up from the bed, she was sitting on the bed, I was in the only chair, and you came to me and wanted to kiss me, I probably would run to the toilet and throw up.
Oh no!
So it was that undecided, I was that sure, or rather not. And then gradually things happened extremely quickly after this.
Can I just ask you before, the details of this, that when you obviously felt you needed to say this, because it would have been a dishonesty between you and your friendship was growing and all of those things. But when you stood outside the door, leaving aside the alarm clock, did you feel better? did you feel that you'd done the right thing? You know, can you remember that emotion standing in that corridor?
I didn't really do it to be the honest thing with her or anything, because I didn't owe her anything. We had no friendship or anything. She hardly noticed me on the radar. So it was more or less...
So you were brave. You were being brave,
or
really.
Stupid.
Well, given how it turned out, I think brave will do.
Okay, yeah, let's stick to brave. I think it was just that I felt so bad. It was so uncomfortable, all these feelings, not knowing what they were. So I thought I had two choices. Either you tell her and something happens, good or bad, or you don't and you carry on feeling awful. So I decided to try and move things along rather than being stuck in the same place all the time.
Yeah.
And like I said, things gradually moved along after this. This was at the very end of April when I told her this, and in May and beginning of June we met on this committee. I was determined to resign from the committee, but I thought that's going to be too cowardly, so I didn't. And we met, and she asked for me to go with her on an errand in the name of the committee. And then she invited me. We had a social gathering, sort of a harvest thing at this committee, and she invited me home afterwards. And it was, you know, her husband was there, and her older son had not gone to bed, and I chatted to them, and they went to bed. And then I chatted to Johanna for hours into the night, and it was the same thing. She was interrogating me, really. How, you know, would you explain what's happening to you? Why me? Blah, blah, blah. And when I got home, I decided I would ask my husband for a divorce, because just talking to her, even if nothing had happened, I knew I loved her, and it was just the most passionate thing I had experienced. And even if nothing would come of it, I thought it's going to be unfair on my husband to keep on being in a relationship, keep on being married. I had been married for 13 years, and unfortunately, at the time I went home with Johanna and realized this was love. My husband was in the Netherlands buying a flat for us in The Hague, and he had signed the papers, and he came home. This was obviously before the time of the internet and everything, so he just had photographs, and he spread them out on the kitchen table, showing where we were going to live with our 4-year-old son. We were doing graduate studies, had been accepted into university, and I had to tell him I wanted a divorce. It was awful. It was the most horrible thing I have experienced, but I felt I had to do it, even if I didn't know what was going to happen with me.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Well, or honest.
Well, I felt it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a happy thing to do.
No. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
You've got the thing. I'm going to take it off you in a moment.
This is just me and Johanna on holiday in Iceland, not having to pretend. And this is the hotel. We went on a pilgrimage later, and I just got this picture. Johanna took this picture of me outside the hotel, where it all started. And this is many, many years later, 2002, when we entered our civil partnership. And my God, had many things happened in between.
So how did you go from that moment where you went home and you talked to your husband, and you had left her and her husband and one of their sons? So something happened between then and this.
Yeah,
obviously. So how did it move to the next? How did you actually decide, or did she decide that she loved you? How did that happen?
At least she started to get interested in me. That was the first thing, and interested to get to know me, and we got to know each other during that summer. After I had decided to divorce, it was all very unconventional, because my husband and I, we lived together throughout the summer until he moved. So I was living with my husband, whom I was divorcing, and getting to know Johanna, and she was living with her husband, not decided to have anything to do with me. And it took the whole of the summer, and the photo during the women's strike was in October, and then our relationship had sort of just begun. So it took those months, and she divorced in January 86. So it was less than a year from my declaration when she divorced. But then we started this secret relationship, because there were no legal rights for gay people or LGBT. LGBT?
Yeah.
we were given a book about an MP in Norway, which is close to Iceland. It's a Nordic country, very open society. And there was a book about a woman who had come out as a lesbian in Norway around about the time Johanna and I got married, got to know each other in 1985. And she lost her career. She completely was just, she couldn't get her seat back in the next election. So it wasn't exactly encouraging.
No,
so,
and I think there's also, it's very interesting to hear you say this, and we'll come on to the broader issues a bit later on. But I was trying to explain to my grown-up children, who are now 24 and 21, that when I was their age, people had to pretend, and they laughed in this country. Yeah. But of course, we all have this romantic idea of Scandinavian countries and Iceland, and that it's all been much better and different. But there was a real threat to Johanna's career with this at that stage.
That's what we thought. And when you're in politics in Iceland, you have to get elected every 4 years, both within your party to get on this list, to be put forward in the parliamentary elections, and also to go and get the vote, the parliamentary vote. And we thought that maybe if people knew that she was in a same-sex relationship, they wouldn't vote for her and her career would be over. And it would have been much more complicated, because if she had to sacrifice her career, our relationship obviously would have been hurt by it, maybe ruined, I don't know. So it wasn't just that she wanted to protect her career, but I also didn't want to push her too much, because I didn't want to spoil the career and be responsible for that. Because I know that she was the right person at the right place. She was a fantastic MP, and later, we had only just begun our relationship when she became a minister, so that it became even more complicated. She was minister for 7 or 8 years. At the beginning of our relationship. So we met at weekends. It was a weekend relationship. I either came to her place or she came to my place, and we always had our kids and their toys and their
So they were involved in this?
Always, from the beginning.
And in this country, we're not going to talk about the press, but talking about the press, there would be this sort of, there would be always the threat of exposure, as it were. Is it a different sort of system in Iceland?
No.
So it was the same. You were worried about a journalist getting wind
We
of
were
this.
worried, and we didn't start living together. As I said, this all happened in 1985, my outburst and that, and then we didn't start living together until 2000. So these years we were hiding, and we were didn't want this to be. I also had elderly parents. I was worried about them. We were worried about. Johanna has 2 boys, and I have the one, and we were worried that they would be bullied and that something would happen to them. And because also, if I just may explain that it's so different when you're coming. When you have a same-sex relationship, you're starting this as a teenager, 13, 14 or whatever, then you go on the so-called gay scene. There was also a gay scene in Iceland, but very, very small and underground. But still, Johanna was in her early 40s, I was in my early 30s, and we had no gay friends. We were just like a little island with our boys, and we had to break up our marriages, and we had to make our sons, sons of single parents. And then also we had nothing to compare with, no sort of people to lean on. So it was, that's I think why it lasted for so long. We were so isolated with this. But while we were having our traumas, and I was, giving her ultimatums and slamming doors and crying, and, because for me, I was a journalist at the time, it wasn't difficult. My job would not have been affected, I think, at all. But of course, it's difficult for a politician. And the press, they were always trying to get, to write about us. But they were really unlucky, because the paper, the yellow, was gossipy paper. There was we are a small society, so there are not so many press, and they were in the next room with me. I wrote for the women's magazine, and we had the same publisher, and we had the same boss. So their hands were a little bit tied behind their backs about writing about us. But it was tried, some magazines tried, and as we didn't live together, it was difficult for them to say they are a couple, because we just swapped houses or met up at weekends.
Yeah. So this is your civil partnership, and then...
Yes, and my mother went out to dinner with us that evening. When I told her about our relationship, she was a widow by then, and we only went out with her to dinner that evening. And I must tell you, because my mother, she died last month, and she was a teetotaler, and she absolutely hated anything to do with alcohol. And we lived in the same house. I was living in one flat, and my father and my mother were living in another, and they obviously started noticing either Johanna's car being outside or me going away with my kid and coming back on Sunday night. So they realized, but nobody said anything, and I didn't say anything to them, and they didn't ask me for years and years and years. And then suddenly my mother asked, are you a couple? And I said yes. And then she sighed and said, oh, your father and I, we were hoping you were just drinking buddies.
I like that. Better a boozer than a lesbian. Excellent. Yeah, fantastic. That should have been the title of the book.
Boozing buddies.
Yeah, boozing buddies.
Yeah. This is just a typical thing for us. This is what you do when you're living a secret life. This is taken in Cambridge. We rented a flat in Cambridge for a month. All these escapes from Iceland were obviously, as Jóhanna has been a member of parliament for 35 years, she's now just retired, but everybody knows her, even small kids, and she was famous for saying when she lost an election within her party, trying to become leader, she said, my time will come, and did this. And even when we see small kids in Iceland who were not even born when she said this, they shout, my time will come. So wherever we went, everybody knew her. So it was such a relief to go somewhere, like going to Cambridge for a month and just be incognito, and it was just wonderful. So we had those escape moments, but it was no life, and I was not happy. And I kept pressing and pressing until we got together finally. There was fantastic love all the time, and I never doubted that she loved me. But it was just such a huge step, because I would not have wanted... Sorry, you can't get a word in edgeways.
No, but they haven't come to hear me. So this is good.
I was just going to say that, now I've forgotten. Yeah. Oh, yes.
You never doubted she loved you.
No.
But it's still the issue of the career, particularly because she was now a minister. So
yes,
the stakes for her were getting higher. And as a woman politician, a world leader woman moving that way, it wasn't just personal. There was her as a role model and all of that.
And also,
I think that's what you were going to say.
No, I was going to say, I'm so passionate about writing. I couldn't survive without it. And it's the same with her with politics and fighting for all issues. She's always been fighting for people who cannot fight for themselves. And the little person, if you can say, those who need somebody to stand up for them. And I would not have wanted anybody to take my writing from me, and therefore I didn't want to take her career from her. Yeah. Dilemma.
Yeah. Next one.
Yeah, next one. Oops. That's just the working grandmother. 3 kids, and she's got this phone attached to her, either to her ear or her hand. She's always working.
Which is part of the same thing, really, isn't it? That what she achieves, not only for women and girls, but very specifically, is very important.
Yes,
she's not
definitely.
Just another politician. She's really,
She is a role model definitely. And if I can just jump a bit, because she became Prime Minister, and we also had a female president in Iceland for 16 years. A lot of young girls grew up thinking it's a woman's job to be Prime Minister and to be president. And they asked, can boys also become president? So, of course, it's important, very important. This is after we had started living together, and we were going together as a married couple. She was the Minister of Social Affairs, and this was taken in Geneva, one of the first trips I went with her as a spouse. And
what happened to make it possible finally to I was going to say come out, but I mean in terms of the press and visibility, what was the trigger that made you think now it's all right, we can do this? Was it a sense of responsibility to other lesbian, gay and transgender people? Was it finally you thought times had changed in politics? What was the
Well, I think actually we could have started living together sooner. It's sometimes if you are afraid for a long time, you just don't know when you're safe. And I think we would have been okay maybe 5 years earlier at least. But then it had stuck, this fear. It had stuck maybe more in Johanna's sort of stomach than in mine, because I never felt any embarrassment or wanted to hide who I loved or whom I loved. I don't know how to say it. I was so in love and I was so happy, and I told her from the very first moment I want to go up to that high church in the middle of Reykjavik and shout my love, all over Reykjavik. I was so proud and so happy, and I never had one moment of doubt. So I could have started living with her the next day, no matter what. It wouldn't have mattered to me. But for her, it was much more difficult. She's 12 years older than me, another generation really, and in that difficult job. So I think that's why it sort of took such a long time. And I'm in the book I relive one of my most difficult memories, which goes to show that if you are trying to be secretive outside, it also transfers inside where you are safe. It was Johanna's 50th birthday, and there was a huge reception. There were about 300 or 400 people there, and afterwards it was only close family left, and somebody said family photo, like they do, family photo, and she stood up, and her sons obviously stood up with her, and I waited. And her mother was there, her father had died, and she called her mother to her side, and then she called her eldest son's girlfriend. They had been together, her eldest son and this girlfriend, for 3 months, and she didn't have me in the picture. And I had been her life partner for 8 years. And it's one of the most awful moments in my life, and I can cry, at the drop of a pin, just remembering it. And I think that's what this does to you, being secretive and you're having your private life as something that you are protecting from everybody. She just didn't, it was so instinctive of her not to have me in her inner circle.
At that moment, I mean, it's clearly even now you can remember how that felt. Was that a moment at which the relationship might have ended? Did it feel like if she cannot own our relationship, even in this circumstance?
Definitely. Yeah. I cried my eyes out and I screamed that she had to take me to another room and lock the door.
That might have been a bit of a giveaway, I feel.
No, the silly thing is that everybody in the room already knew about our relationship. Yeah. So it was so ridiculous. It was so unnecessary. So I screamed and shouted and cried, and she tried to calm me down. And it was one of many moments when the relationship ended or almost ended, and I often ended it. And what finally made us go, start living together is perhaps that we were apart once again because I was so tired of waiting, and I went to a lesbian get-together, and it was the evening of her Johanna's son's marriage, and she was at the wedding party, and I was sniffing, silently in this lesbian community there, and I just...
It's a lovely image, I must say.
So I wasn't drinking, so I took my car keys and just left. And the next day, somebody phoned me and said, I saw you last night, would you like to meet up for coffee? And I did that, and Johanna heard of it, and maybe that was a kind of trigger. She thought, I can't wait any longer, and so she finally decided that she was going to live with me, and we've been living together since.
Go on. Right, take us from Geneva.
Yes, and we went we went not just public but global, because this is me there on the left with all the wives of the Nordic prime ministers. Next to me is the Finnish girlfriend of the Finnish Prime Minister, then is the wife of the Norwegian one, and then the wife of the Swedish one, and the Danish wife at the end. And I actually think these spouse things are so, 19th century, really.
They are all married to men.
Yes.
I should,
Yeah.
just in case you were wondering that there are sort of 5 other women in the background.
Yeah. And this is, where it took us. We had no idea this was going to happen. We thought we would just finally have our lovely little private life together with our families and, breakfast and Sunday lunches. And it went like this because we had this bank crisis in Iceland. 3 of the major banks collapsed.
Yeah, we did hear about that,
Yeah, you did. Not my fault. And Jóhanna was called in as the only politician with her reputation intact for being honest and hardworking, and everybody, didn't matter where they were politically, they accepted that she was the only person who could deal with this. So she became Prime Minister. On the same day, the world media started talking about our relationship, the thing we had been trying so much to keep quiet, and we
Well,
our life changed.
she was the first acknowledged lesbian Prime Minister of any country.
Yes.
Not to say that there might be other unacknowledged Prime Ministers, but she was very much...
First openly gay, yeah. That's the grandmother trying. This is when she was Prime Minister. We had a Christmas party that's 6 of the grandchildren. The one, number 7, came last month, or in January rather. And that's my son and his girlfriend with Johanna. Having a little walk. There's in the national park called Þingvellir, there is a house which is supposed to be the Prime Minister's summer retreat or whatever, and 2,000 people at least come to this park every day, and they were all lying at the window. So it was like being in a cage.
Yeah.
And we tried to go there. This is taken that we really only ventured out after all
After
the
dark.
tourists. Yeah. Almost. And they were all coming. If she left the house, they were, "You're the Prime Minister. You're the Prime Minister." They were coming running after her and asking for photos.
With the press, you had been a journalist, you had a radio show, you're, very well versed in all parts of the media. So you knew that was likely to happen. Was it all upsetting attention, or actually was some of it really good? And did you feel proud of being visibly there as a couple for the world to see? Because those role models for particularly for younger people, and particularly now in countries where things are getting worse, it's very important to have this visible leadership showing that how successful and wonderful this is.
Yes, no, I think when this happened, it happened within one day.
Yeah.
So there was no leading up to it. It just happened. It was like being dropped into the deep end. So, but of course, yes, we were extremely proud. The thing is that Jóhanna, she got such an assignment thrown in her lap to rescue a whole society from the brink of bankruptcy. So that was the thing that she was thinking about and working on all day. So she had really no time to think about what this was doing for gay people, but we enjoyed getting lots and lots of messages. We got letters, emails, Facebook messages from people all over the world, and they were saying they had cried when they heard the news, and this gave them so much hope. And they were also telling us some dreadful stories about what happened to their friends or their family members in their countries because of being gay. So we were really very much aware of how important this was, and people were also saying, even people in countries in Europe quite close to us were saying, this will never, not just hasn't happened, will never ever happen in my country. So yes, we know it's important, and she got asked to do a lot of interviews in the gay media and also to come and speak, but she was just so busy saving Iceland, if you can say it that way, that she had no time to deal with those issues or start talking to some dictators in Africa or anything. So, but she did have. It was her idea that I wrote the book about these 30 years of ours together, and it's in a way it's our way of saying thank you and being visible, and also people in Iceland where everything is now so comfortable regarding gay rights, legal rights, adoption, everything. They say, why this book now? Isn't it far too late? Why didn't you take part in the battle when we really needed to ask for legislation, etc.? But I think it's never too late, because like we were talking about regarding feminism, backlashes also happen in this area. And there was a recent survey with the LGBT society in Iceland asking people, their members, have you been sort of discriminated against? Have you been bullied? And I think over 70% said they had such incidences.
And legislation can be reversed, and it is indeed being reversed.
Of course, yeah.
I love the fact that as you're telling this really epic story of your wife actually having to save an entire country, they've somehow laid on some stirring music somewhere in the film. Oh, this is fantastic. Your life is actually a film.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Violence. Yeah. That's Johanna with her sons. And that's Johanna and Mosse with Sandy and her wife Debbie. You all know her, of course. Yeah. She came to Iceland like Kate and through Kate to deliver a speech and give out the prizes for the Women's Literary Prize that I'm involved with. And she, of course, like women, like to multitask. So she did a program for the BBC at the same time. And this is taken at the national park I was telling you about in -10 degrees. And I can tell you, we were really, really cold. It was very cold. And that's the Danish Prime Minister. She came to Iceland on an official visit. Her husband is the son of...
Neil and Glenys Kinnock.
Exactly. And he wasn't available, so he didn't accompany her.
But that's such a wonderful... That's a modern image. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
You know, the official picture. Yeah. There it is. You know, the three women there.
Yeah, exactly. And this is an interesting trip. We went on 2 official visits, which are the most formal of anything they can imagine. It's protocol, every second is, decided beforehand. And we went to little old Faroe Islands, which is our next door neighbor in the North Atlantic, and we went to China. And this is the first trip. It was in 2010, and this is me and Johanna with the Prime Minister and his wife in China, in the Faroe Islands. And there was a huge fuss because on these occasions there's always an official dinner, a gala dinner in honor of the guests. And there was this MP who denied, he refused to come to dinner because he said we were immoral and Johanna was unethical to bring me and sort of flaunt me in front of everybody and flaunt her sexuality. So he refused, and he refused to dine with us. And of course it was the good thing, because if he's that way inclined, it's better he was at home, of course. He would not have been a nice guy to dine with. But the thing is that it made the whole of the Faroe Islands very, very ashamed, and they kept, everybody at the dinner kept saying how sorry they were.
Because that did get into the papers.
It most certainly did, and it was a terrible thing for them, and they are very much ashamed of this, and it was just a huge issue for them. And when we went on the plane, the next day was a Faroese plane, and when the captain came on, he said that he especially welcomed Johanna and her wife on the plane. So everybody was trying to make amends, and it was very sweet.
Because really, actually, in a funny sort of way, sometimes everybody in this room will know that there are shades of grey in all of these things. There's explicit homophobia and racism and whatever, and there's also the stuff that goes on underneath the surface, which is hidden, and somehow it's all gone now. Yeah. So sometimes having I won't say the word that came into my mind, a man like that being quite that silly is quite helpful, because it brings out the fact that there is under the surface a lot of discrimination, and that needs to be flushed out too. So,
and also like with so many things, we know this personally. Everybody lands. Sometimes something happens and you think this is the end of the world, and then sometime later you look back and you think, wow, this is when my life changed for the better. I just didn't realize. I thought everything was finished, and maybe it was that kind of a moment for the Faroese, because when we were there, this was September 2010. They didn't have a gay society there. They didn't have. I mean, all the gay and lesbian people and what have you, they went to Copenhagen to disappear in the crowd, because they are such a small community, even much smaller than Iceland. And after this incident, they organized themselves, and there's now a very strong LGBT society there. And they even have had 2 gay pride marches, and they say per capita their gay pride is the largest in the world. Because I think they got 6,000 people downtown. I don't know how many there are in the Faroe Islands. Either
7,000.
No,
I don't know.
30, 40,000, something like that.
Yeah.
So it was a huge turnout, and they are so strong, and they are now have a bill in their little parliament asking. It's not going to be agreed on, because this guy is still in parliament and he is even in charge of those social issues. But things have changed so much,
and it's a wonderful thing, because firstly it's that 1 person, 2 people, 4 people can change everything.
Yes,
it doesn't,
exactly.
But it's also that a lot of us need a little bit of help being courageous, and you just need something that helps everybody be courageous, and that's clearly what happened. And then you went to China.
Then we went to China, next door.
Next door.
Yeah.
They've got a few more people in China.
A few more people, yes. And this is us being shown around. This is the touristy bit of the visit. There's Johanna on the red carpet, as you do, and I was not attending this. I was told there was a lot of issue when people heard, when the world media heard that we were going there as a couple on an official visit. Before we even left Iceland, there was a lot of interest in how is China going to handle this. I know it's not a huge issue. None of you probably ever heard of this, but a lot of people in these in case, especially in China and also in other countries, they were wondering how is this going to be, dealt with. And I was told that it was spouses were never there at this moment, so I wasn't there. And I didn't really miss it. And there were some reports in the world media saying I was airbrushed from the visit, but I wasn't really. They never told, never sat on the TV station there that I was with Johanna. But in the printed press, they actually said I was there, and they gave my name, and I don't know whether they sort of flaunted that. Notice she is a woman, because my name wouldn't have meant anything in China, so maybe they just hoped, that they didn't realize. But some newspapers there interviewed me, and I went on I had a spouse program. Of course, there's me going into the official dinner, and that's the Prime Minister of China, and then Johanna, and then me. So I wasn't hidden away. And there he is, he has to sit. Johanna is in the middle with white hair, and I'm on her right side, and the Prime Minister is on her left side. And so I was definitely not completely.
But it's interesting that actually the press, up to their old tricks in one way, they were determined that this was a slight. But when we were talking about it, you said, well, it wasn't like that at all. The Faroe Islands were, had a bit of an issue, but actually China didn't. No. So that was interesting, the way it played out in the press as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to move you towards the lovely rose picture.
That's me, a spouse program, visiting a university where they had a huge neon sign with my name, wife of the Icelandic Prime Minister, so and so. And that's a small sign. They had outside of the building a huge one, but. So they were not hiding me. This is Johanna last summer taking part in a demonstration outside the Russian embassy in Iceland because of the anti-gay laws. And this is on her last day in office. There is a reading group of women who come from They support different political parties, and when they realized that she was about to leave office because she is now retired, we had the elections at the end of April last year. These women in the reading group, they started an event on Facebook saying, why don't we come with a red rose and give Johanna a rose on her last day in the office? And 1,000 people turned up. And it was fantastic, and they sang for her, and they were shouting outside waiting for her to come out, and she was really touched and was wonderful. And there she's on the steps of her office with the board of the LGBT association in Iceland, and that's us with a statue that she was giving. Yeah, that's the little statue says, "My time will come." I think that's the last one. Yeah.
Well, I think what is so wonderful hearing you talk is you're both extraordinary women. And that's why the book is a love story. But everything else, the politics, the social politics of it, the campaigning, all the things, and neither of you set out to be icons or role models, but actually just by virtue of being generous enough and actually biding your time until it was possible to be a married female couple in the eyes of the world, it does do an enormous amount of good, and sadly possibly is more important now than it even was 5 years ago. I mean, that is the tragic thing. Yeah. So we all know that things for women don't just go forward in a glorious march. No. They sometimes go back. Please enjoy the rest of WOW. It is an incredibly important festival. Next year will be bigger and better. Tweet about it. But really, I think the day belongs to Johanna, but most importantly, to the very wonderful Jónína Leósdóttir. Leóna, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And sorry, you're going to be embarrassed now, but a very big thank you for the signers. You've done an amazing job, and it's wonderful that the whole festival has been supported in that way. So thank you, Joe. Thank you.